Have you ever noticed that people only realize your worth when you stop giving it away? Every relationship, romantic, friendly, or professional, has a subtle rhythm. At first, you are the one reaching out. You reply quickly, explain yourself, try to prove you're enough. You invest your energy, your time, your heart, believing that consistency and effort will be seen, appreciated, or reciprocated. Connection seems to demand vulnerability, openness, and persistence. You give freely, without hesitation, but slowly the balance begins to tip. Replies grow shorter, words become scarce. Your presence, once welcomed, is now taken for granted. Without realizing it, the very space where you tried to shine starts to feel heavy, shrinking around you. You start to feel invisible in the place where you were trying to be seen. That's when a shift begins, not in them, but in you. You stop reaching. You stop chasing. You stop offering pieces of yourself for temporary attention. In the quiet that follows, something profound awakens. Clarity. It is the kind of clarity the Stoics spoke of. Your peace does not depend on another person's recognition. It lives in your ability to let go gracefully and intentionally. Stillness doesn't shout for attention. It doesn't demand, beg, or prove itself. It simply exists, and in that existence, it becomes louder than words ever could. When you withdraw, others are forced to face the space you once filled. Your silence is not punishment, it is wisdom. It is the conscious decision to no longer participate in dynamics that demand more from you than they are willing to give. You are not retreating in defeat. You are returning to yourself in strength and self respect. Stillness is far from passive. It is intentional, disciplined, and powerful. It exposes imbalance. It creates a mirror where those who once ignored your efforts begin to see their own behavior reflected back. People panic when your voice, your energy, and your presence are no longer at their disposal. They are confronted with absence, reflection, and the weight of what they never appreciated. Stoic philosophers remind us that stillness is strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Epictetus said, "If someone does not want to be with me, I want to be with them even less." These are not lessons in coldness or cruelty. They are lessons in self-possession. Your worth is not determined by others' attention. It is determined by your own clarity, integrity, and discernment. In this stillness, you stop reacting to every delay, every silence, every expectation. You stop explaining yourself, stop seeking validation, and stop chasing what was never truly offered. Your presence becomes magnetic, not because you demand it, but because you no longer give it away freely. People rarely realize how much they depend on someone until that person steps back. Your consistency, care, and patience were assumed to always be there. And when they are no longer available, absence becomes awareness. The connection they took for granted suddenly shows its true weight. Stillness is not isolation, it is healing. It is the space where the energy you once spent trying to be seen finally returns home. You reclaim your focus, clarity, and emotional power. Your silence becomes a mirror for others, reflecting the imbalance they created while you were present. Your absence teaches them a lesson they could not learn while you were constantly giving. This is self mastery, wisdom, quiet power. It is the assertion of your value, not through words, drama, or anger, but through restraint, patience, and intentional withdrawal. True influence does not come from chasing or explaining, it comes from being grounded in yourself. By stepping back, you stop over explaining, stop reacting to every impulse, and stop trying to control perceptions. In that quiet, your value rises, not because you changed, but because you stop overextending yourself. Your stillness pulls others into reflection without manipulation. It forces them to confront their own emptiness, the absence of effort, and the cost of taking you for granted. Your presence is no longer available to be consumed at will. Your loyalty, patience, and care, once invisible, now echo in their awareness. They realize, too late, the energy you carried silently, the emotional labor you gave freely, and the consistency they assumed was endless. Stillness is the art of choosing yourself. It is grounding, not drama. It is reclaiming your peace, focus, and emotional sovereignty. It is the deliberate decision to stop giving what is not valued, to stop chasing those who do not see you, and to stop explaining yourself to those unwilling to understand. The Stoics remind us that wisdom comes not from reaction, but from restraint. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. In stillness, you refuse to be provoked. You refuse to clarify unnecessarily. You refuse to fight for recognition. You speak from presence, or you speak not at all. In a world addicted to noise, distraction, and emotional overexposure, your calm presence becomes revolutionary. Silence becomes a mirror. Your absence becomes a teacher. Your return to yourself is the ultimate act of self-respect. Attachment is quiet. It grows in background, woven into your presence, patience, and care. Because it is constant, it is often taken for granted until it disappears. Then, absence blooms awareness. People realize too late what they depended on. Your presence, patience, and energy become irreplaceable once gone. And that is the power of stillness. Not passive, not bitter, not manipulative. Stillness is strength. Stillness is clarity. Stillness is mastery. It is where you reclaim your peace, energy, and value. And when you return to yourself, fully grounded and unshaken, nothing and no one can take that away. There comes a moment in every relationship, romantic, friendly, or professional, when your presence, your effort, and your care are taken for granted. People don't see all the invisible work you do to hold things together. The patience, the emotional labor, the constant effort to make connections feel effortless. They assume your kindness is limitless, your availability unconditional. They forget or never notice that the stability they lean on is something you consciously give. Then, One day, you step back. You stop overextending. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your actions. And suddenly, the dynamic shifts. People start asking questions. They wonder what went wrong. They replay interactions in their mind, trying to reconstruct a timeline that explains your absence. But what they're really missing isn't you. They're missing the comfort of being effortlessly seen, the safety you quietly provided, the calm that came from your presence. They miss the version of connection where they never had to reach out because you were already there. That ease, that invisible thread that held everything together. They're longing for that, not the person who created it. By the time they realize it, you've already changed. You no longer seek to be understood. You no longer measure your worth by someone else's recognition. You've learned that true connection doesn't require disappearing to be noticed. And as you detach, you gain clarity. You see all the times you gave more than you received, the times you mistook being needed for being valued. You forgive yourself for not noticing sooner. You start reclaiming your energy, your time, your presence. Some people may return. Often they do. But they don't return because they suddenly understand your worth. They return because they feel the emptiness you once filled. And when they come back, they find someone different. Not angry or bitter, not colder, just clearer. Not available in the way they once relied on. That clarity feels like distance, but it's not distance, it's healing. It's you no longer shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable. Chasing someone can feel noble at first. You tell yourself it's about love, effort, loyalty, but underneath, it's something else. Every time you overextend, every time you justify behavior that disrespects your presence, you are signaling, even if unconsciously, I need something from you that I cannot find in myself. What should have been mutual becomes unequal. You give too much. They take too much. And in trying so hard to be seen, you slowly erase the very value you were trying to display. The moment you stop chasing, the illusion collapses. The imbalance vanishes. They are no longer elevated. They are exposed. You see clearly how little they were giving, how much they were taking, how long they coasted on your consistency while offering the bare minimum. And instead of regret, you feel relief. Detaching doesn't just remove you from their world, it returns you to your own. You are no longer waiting for recognition to feel seen. You are no longer desperate for someone else's response to feel heard. You no longer shrink to maintain a connection that existed only because you carried it. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Your suffering doesn't come from their lack of effort. It comes from your decision to chase, to hope, to keep giving where giving has become self-abandonment. Seneca reminded us that no one can control everything they want, but they can control not wanting what they do not have. You cannot rely on someone else's recognition to define your worth. When you finally stop overgiving, stop explaining, stop justifying, something remarkable happens. Silence becomes louder than words. Your boundaries are clear. Your presence becomes precious. And when they notice your absence, they may try to return, but you are not the same. You haven't become someone else. You've simply stopped being less of yourself to be more for them. That quiet shift, that calm self-possession, is the real power. Silence is not weakness. It's strength. It's presence. It's clarity. It's the realization that you no longer need to prove your value to those unwilling or unable to recognize it. Peace does not live in proving, chasing, or shrinking. It lives in presence, in self-respect, in boundaries. The relationships that were only alive because of your overgiving begin to unravel. The effort you once gave is no longer taken for granted. And in that unraveling, you discover freedom. You discover clarity. You discover that your worth was never missing. It was hidden beneath your own overgiving. You are not bitter, not broken, just done. Done with proving. Done with chasing. Done with shrinking to be digestible. And in that space, in that calm, in that quiet strength, you finally come home to yourself. You reclaim your energy, your peace, your presence. And in that reclamation lies your true power. Silence isn't absence. It isn't avoidance. It isn't emptiness. It's the presence of something deeper, strength, clarity, self-possession. Silence signals that you no longer overextend for those who only listen to respond, not to understand. It's radical, precise, and powerful. It's not retreat. It's redefinition. And when they try to return, they will find someone new. Not because you became someone else, but because you stopped being less of yourself to be more to them. And that quiet shift, that calm, unshakable presence, is the real power. That is what it means to reclaim yourself, to stop chasing, and to finally live in peace. It doesn't need a caption. It doesn't need sound. It just sits there, quiet, calm, steady. And in that quiet, it does something most people never notice. It exposes every crack in the connection you spent so long trying to hold together. Every word you explained, every apology you offered, every effort to smooth things over, all of it becomes visible in the emptiness you leave behind. Because here's the truth. Silence doesn't just leave others with absence. It leaves them with themselves. And that is the part they are not ready to face. When you stop explaining, stop apologizing, stop overextending, your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects everything they've buried, their guilt, their fear, their neglect, and their inability to see your worth. In the absence of your words, they start to replay the messages you left behind, dissect your tone, invent pauses that never existed. Their own mind begins to fill in the blanks, and what they see is often their own failure, their own inadequacy, their own remorse. This is where obsession begins. Not when you spoke, not when you tried to fix things, not when you begged for understanding. It begins when you stop, when your presence no longer cushions them from the reality of themselves. They are forced to ask questions you once answered. Most people fear that more than anything, facing the truth of who they are and what they've done. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Your silence removes all their distractions. It forces them to hear what was always there, buried beneath your effort to fix, clarify, and explain. Now there is just space, and in that space, the weight of their neglect becomes undeniable. You are not silent to punish. They are not the target of revenge. You are silent because you finally understand the value of your own time, attention, and energy. Not every conversation deserves it. Not every relationship is sacred. And sometimes the strongest boundaries are the quietest. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have little time, but that we waste much of it." And isn't that the hardest part? Realizing how much life you spent trying to be heard by someone who never intended to listen? How much of yourself you gave away in the hope that they would finally understand, finally appreciate, finally care? You repeated yourself, over-explained, softened your words, and yet they could not comprehend, not because you failed, but because they weren't capable. Now, your silence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. It carries every moment you were dismissed, every time your kindness was mistaken for weakness, every instance where your presence was taken for granted. You do not need a dramatic exit. You do not need to announce your withdrawal. True silence is clean, composed, final. It does not defend. It does not argue. It simply stops. And that is what makes it so unnerving. There is nothing left to push against, nothing left to blame, nothing left to explain. Slowly, they begin to feel it. Not all at once, but in waves, in moments when they reach for you and realize you are no longer there, in memories that once comforted, now tinged with loss, in the realization that your absence weighs more heavily than your presence ever did. Silence is paradoxical. It is not lighter, it is louder, not softer, it is sharper, not distant, it is intimate in a way only reflection can be. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Yet most people speak endlessly to avoid hearing themselves. Your silence is not a call to return, not a bid for reconciliation. It is an invitation to reflect. Whether they accept it is no longer your concern. Because when you choose stillness over struggle, you reclaim something far more valuable than attention. You reclaim your peace. You stop fighting to be seen. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop seeking validation. You simply exist, calm, composed, unmoved. True power does not need to scream. It does not need recognition. It simply is. And when the world finally quiets down, your stillness is what remains. If they come back, they will find a different version of you. Not bitter, not guarded, not hardened, but no longer available to be misunderstood. Once silence has done its work, there is nothing left to say. Every relationship, every glance, every conversation takes place within an invisible frame, the delicate balance of attention, effort, and value. Most people do not see it, yet it determines everything: who holds power, who invests energy, who gets priority. When you chase, when you overextend, you place your worth in someone else's hands. You bend, you perform, you overexplain, you wait. You become anchored to their approval, their reactions, their recognition. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You cannot do that when your identity is built inside someone else's frame. Detachment is not abandonment. It is a return to yourself. It is the refusal to give away your energy to those who never deserved it. It is the creation of your own frame, clear, calm, composed, unwavering. In that shift, they notice, they feel your absence. They realize they can no longer predict your reactions, rely on your availability, or manipulate your attention. Power hides in calm, not confrontation; in silence, not noise; in boundaries, not chaos. You stop chasing. You start attracting those who meet you in the middle because you no longer perform. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Your peace was never negotiable, and once you claim it, the dynamics around you shift effortlessly. Influence does not come from the loudest voice. It comes from the one who does not flinch when silence stretches, who does not rush to fill awkward pauses, who does not fear being misunderstood. When you know your value, you do not beg for recognition, you embody it. That presence speaks louder than words ever could. Slowly, those who once controlled your emotions begin to notice the shift. They feel your absence, not only physically, but energetically. That gravity is not manipulation. It is the natural consequence of returning to yourself. Detachment is clarity, not coldness. It is peace, not anger. Real peace comes when you stop giving your energy to be seen, heard, or validated. It comes from understanding that not every message deserves a reply. Not every silence must be filled. You choose your engagement, not to manipulate, but to protect your mind, your rhythm, and your emotional clarity. The Stoics taught that happiness comes from living without unnecessary desires, from alignment within yourself rather than approval from others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself. When you stop needing reactions, replies, or understanding, you finally rest. And then something remarkable happens. You are understood, not through argument, explanation, or effort, but through the clarity of your absence. The stillness speaks, and they hear it in a way words never could. Detachment leads inward, where real healing begins. It is no longer about them. It is about reclaiming yourself, your rhythm, your clarity, and your peace. Seneca said, "He suffers more than necessary who suffers before is necessary." Detachment frees you from suffering twice: once from others' disappointment, and once from the story you tell yourself about it. You begin to see things clearly, no longer romanticizing red flags, no longer confusing effort with worth, no longer mistaking availability for love. You are free, quiet, still, unshakable. And in that stillness, real power waits. It waits quietly, patiently, infinitely. You've changed in ways others might not notice, but you feel it in every step you take. You no longer confuse inconsistency with mystery. You no longer stay in spaces or relationships that cloud your mind or drain your energy. You no longer let the unpredictability of others dictate your peace. Now you see reality clearly, not with anger or resentment, but with acceptance. That kind of clarity is rare. You've learned the art of being unbothered, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've stopped giving every feeling away freely. You've learned the value of discernment. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You know when to lean in and when to step back. You don't reach out for validation or to be chosen anymore. You choose. You make decisions that align with your values, your peace, and your growth. And the calm that comes with that choice is undeniable. You carry yourself differently now. You walk into rooms without needing to explain your presence. You engage with people without the desperate need to be liked. You listen more and speak less, not because you have nothing to say, but because your words now carry weight. They are measured, intentional, and impactful. People notice the shift, but they might not understand it. They might call it distance or claim you've changed, and they would be right. You've stopped being emotionally accessible to those who never earned your closeness. You no longer overshare in the hope of connection. You no longer compromise your boundaries to maintain peace. The version of you that needed constant reassurance has gone quiet. In its place stands something far stronger: wisdom, discernment, and inner sovereignty. You're not cold, you're clear. There's no resentment, only realignment. You're not punishing others with your silence. You're respecting yourself. You're not shutting doors. You're simply no longer leaving them wide open for those who don't value your presence. And if they can't handle that, it's not your problem, it's theirs. Their struggle reveals how much they relied on your openness without ever offering their own. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Detachment is the practice of returning to yourself, free from the noise of others' expectations, free from bending to their moods, free from mistaking their inconsistency for your inadequacy. You center yourself. You stop scattering your energy across chaos. Life becomes simpler, quieter, clearer. You stop chasing peace from people who thrive on disorder. You stop seeking love from those who only know how to take. You stop waiting for clarity from those addicted to confusion. And in that stillness, you become something irreplaceable, an unbothered presence that others notice without you needing to perform. There's a reason silence lingers longer than words. When something ends with clarity and intention, we grieve, process, and move forward. But when someone disappears without explanation, the mind loops. We replay their last text, their last glance, their last change in tone, searching for meaning that may never come. That's not weakness, it's human psychology. The mind is designed to close loops. Without closure, obsession grows. Carl Jung said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life. In the absence of closure, the brain crafts meaning, even imagined, even painful." Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished experiences stick in the mind far longer than completed ones. Your brain doesn't do this to hurt you. It does it because it's trying to understand what's incomplete. And understanding feels impossible when the story has no ending. Here's where your power begins. The same energy that fuels obsession can be redirected. If you cannot get closure from them, you give it to yourself. You tell yourself, "I didn't walk away because I stopped caring. I walked away because I started caring about myself." That single statement is a turning point, a new chapter that doesn't depend on anyone else turning the page. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." But what happens when someone leaves without showing you anything? You learn to find truth in the silence. Their absence is not an attack, it's a message. Often, it's clearer than any words they could have spoken. They were unwilling to do the work, unwilling to communicate honestly. That reflects on their capacity, not your worth. The hardest truth is this: some people leave not because the connection wasn't real, but because it required responsibility, effort, or accountability they couldn't handle. They vanish. They avoid conversation. They choose the easy way out over honesty. That silence echoes, but not forever. Eventually, it softens. It becomes a distant hum that no longer hurts, a reminder not of loss, but of growth. Because the moment you stop seeking answers from them, you begin listening to yourself. And if they ever return, do not be surprised. You no longer need their explanations. You've already turned the page. That is the ultimate closure. The closure you give yourself when no one else had the courage to offer it. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is to walk away, not in anger, not with noise, but with complete, undeniable peace. When you stop chasing clarity from others, you generate it within yourself. That clarity doesn't demand to be understood. It simply moves forward, unshaken, unshakable, untouched. Your stillness is your strength. Your boundaries are your power. Your clarity is undeniable. And the world notices it, not because it's loud, but because it's rare, whole, and unforgettable. When you finally embrace your inner sovereignty, you no longer need anyone's permission to heal, to move forward, or to protect your peace. That is the mark of true strength: calm, unwavering, and complete.